I should be able to go an hour. This is
Happy Friday, socialites. Welcome to the best damn social club in the universe, the 42 Social Club. I am your host, Jedi ASU, and thank you for joining me this Friday, spending some of your Friday to be able to just go ahead, visit, chat, and enjoy, and be with my guest, the himself, the great Kaelen Jones, and we get to go ahead and talk a lot about not only his experience at ASU, but also covering Texas football and what else he has been able to do. So go ahead and pour yourself a drink, sit back, relax, and let's get social. It is Friday, the 21st of August, 2020. Hopefully, you had a great week. And as always, just like my tweet says, hopefully your feet hurt because you kicked so much ass this week. So just happy to be here. I know that we have had a couple great shows this week. We had one with Nam Le talking about UFOs, and it kind of spiraled into discussions about sci-fi in general, how aliens would react to humans and what we would expect. But today we get to visit with another friend of mine, a very kind, intelligent, and just, I want to say, resplendent gentleman that I am extremely happy to have on the show. Kaelen Jones, you are on the stream. How are you, my man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you doing?
I am just happy to be here again. Like I said, like we were doing with the pregame, I am happy to see you again. I think it was the last time we saw was at a tailgate down in Arizona. Although I was on,
Yeah,
but I was actually on one of your shows. I was nervous as hell. Was it you and El Toscano? Were you doing something on Blaze?
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I forget what it's called. Justin's gonna kill me. I forget what our radio show was called, but
Right.
yes, I do remember having you on.
Yeah, because I mean, I kept bugging you guys for weeks, and then all of a sudden, all right, we're gonna have you on the show, and so we did something. So I appreciate you returning the favor. We'll have El Toscano on whenever baseball's over with too. So we'll see, because he's covering the Mets now, or is he covering the Mets?
Yeah, he's covering the Mets.
Yeah, so that'll
Yeah,
be interesting to hear.
big
All
time.
the what is it? They have to go ahead and lock down for a few days now. That I guess some of them tested positive for the Rona, unfortunately. So how is your, and
Yeah.
obviously you're covering Texas football, but how is your time right now? What have you been up to? Tell everyone out there, what are you doing right now?
Oh man, so right, like I spent the year before, like in Austin, Texas, for the first time in my life, covering Texas football, and that was a lot. It was definitely a whirlwind. I've spent the past couple months now with the Ringer.
Okay.
I'm covering the NFL now. Well, mostly NFL. I've definitely dabbled in college football. I'm trying to stake out and carve out some college football content out there for them. So
Right.
it's been fun. It's a weird time. Just in general,
Of
but
course.
the transition from jobs in the middle of it has definitely been strange. But everyone I've worked with is pretty great. Very
Absolutely.
grateful.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too that I was thinking about, because I've been working remotely for almost 7 years now. So to have, I mean, to have all you need is a cell connection and internet, and you can literally work anywhere on the planet, right? And people,
Right.
you can call, you can interview, you can video conference like this now. As long as it's stable, you can do wherever you're at, right? So I mean, I remember working wherever I need to. I used to take my laptop all the time, and even then, when I would come visit Tempe, if I had to work, I'd pull it out for a little, pull that
Yep.
laptop out and play, and you were set. So I mean, but now that there's games going on, are you assigned to any particular teams? Or are you just covering people, or how's that working for you right now?
It's just been general assignment for me so far, which is different because like I'm in a national role as opposed to, covering a specific team. I've always kind of thrived having, one central focus and being able to hammer on that,
Right.
being a master of one thing. Now it's, trying to be a master of all things, especially in the NFL when, everybody is covering it on top of that. And there's a lot of talented people in this field.
Absolutely.
So it's a completely different challenge. And, it's exciting, but also a little bit nerve wracking if I'm being completely honest. I've reached out to as many, veterans as I know who have been covering the league for a minute and they all think I'm capable. I think I'm capable, but I understand it's a process. It's not going to
Absolutely.
happen overnight.
How is that, right? Given, I mean, obviously, who are you working with? Ringer picked you up, right?
Yes.
So obviously they saw something in you. So what was it? Is it something that you have to do differently in the way you're reporting to stand out, or what has it been that you've been learning, kind of just to establish yourself in that space?
See, like the thing that I thrive on is always like very interpersonal connections,
Okay.
like, meeting people and even when it comes to sourcing, which, to be completely honest, like back in college, I didn't understand how that worked outside of, people that I knew for ASU's recruiting department,
Right.
like kids who were my age. Now it's a completely different thing where, you're having to reach out to agents, you're having to reach out
Oh,
to
okay.
different background sources and it's been a little bit different because again like I'm not one-on-one with players and I'm not able to say hey like PR person like I want this person to speak with like it's been different in that aspect especially without training camp or me being out at training camp
Yeah.
and not having normal circumstances where I could potentially like do a tour of all NFL teams and
Of
get
course.
familiar with people. It's been kind of stuck at home and figure it out from there and come up with creative ideas. So that's where the challenge has been.
That's interesting because I back in so early in my career, I did a lot of cold calling, right, for sales.
Right.
So I
Mhm.
imagine that's the way it is, right? You're
Yeah.
calling, you're saying, you're trying to send emails out with a subject that catches someone eye, or you have,
Yep.
your quick elevator pitch to say, okay, I need to say this in 7 seconds before they hang up on me. So
Right.
yeah, so that's I think one of the things I'd love to hear what you're doing to network because I think that's one of my things that I'm still working on is how to network better, right? Because I'm very comfortable, in the ASU circle, and I've been
Right.
good enough, and I've been lucky enough to
Right.
reach out to some people in the Cal circle and so forth. But there's other ones that just reach out cold. Is I think one of the things that I'm just probably not good at yet. But honestly, I haven't been trying too heavily. But I'm waiting to hear, what you're able to do. So that will help me.
Yeah, no, as far as like networking, I've been lucky in that, there's been some reaching out on the account of like other people. I feel like when you get in a high enough space, I guess, like other people, there will be like very organic connections that come about. Like
Okay,
when I first got hired, like people from certain teams in the NFL had communications people who reached out to me and
right
introduced
on.
themselves, and like that for me was like, I don't know if we could swear, but like holy, like
You
it's
should you should fucking swear.
okay, good. But yeah, it really like a whole shit moment because it's a completely different ball game. Like those are people who cover or not cover, but hold the gateway to NFL teams, which
That's
is a completely different thing from college football teams, too,
right.
which is much more guarded, but still with the NFL, it's it is what it is.
That must have been quite the call to take, right? One, it's a number you don't necessarily recognize, but then two, it's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
so and so with a particular team and media coverage, and you're like, and it were I would imagine some teams were better at it than others.
So only a handful of teams have. Like I hope I'm not overselling that. Only a handful of teams did,
Right.
but like like it definitely still is like whether it's a DM, a text, or a call, like it's still like damn, like that's nice of them, to go out of their
Absolutely.
way to talk to me. So that's extremely helpful. As far as again, like building the other connections that I still need,
Right.
it's gonna again for me, it's very much about coming down to let me at least introduce myself in person, let you get a feel for me, and vice versa. Like, I know there's reporters who thrive off of like a lack of interpersonal connection.
Right.
Like some people are just good at, being flimsy and or not flimsy, I guess, but like not taking, understanding that you're just there for a one purpose.
Right.
Like for me, it's it's not hard, but it also is hard for me to, be like, okay, I'm just here to get information out of you and move on. I
Yeah.
want to know everything about you that I can in the short time that we interact,
Right.
and I thrive off the connections that way. That's why I feel like, once training camp is hopefully open next season and I can go around the
Of
country and
course.
interact with folks, then I think that's where I'll finally start to make some headway moving forward. And
Ex-
that's why I've heard from colleagues on my own staff, like
Right.
teaching me about moving forward too. Sorry about that.
No, and that makes perfect sense. I think that's the other thing too, is that in your what is it in your field, right? Being able to be on the field in person is definitely a heck of a lot more valuable, right? Because you always see some sort
Right,
of blogs or writers that try to write about a team that aren't even in the same city, right? They're like, "Oh, I cover so and so, or are you at practices? Who are you interviewing? What are you
right,
doing?" and all this other stuff. But also, that face to face interaction is invaluable, right? Because then they know you,
exactly,
they see, and I think that's where my networking is that I enjoy being face to face because then I can have a better conversation rather than, okay,
exactly,
here's my pitch, and now I'm going to wait for you to respond, right? So,
exactly.
and I think being able to do that, but that's actually very exciting that you can the long term plan or goal for you is to be able to go to multiple training camps, not necessarily covering one team. You'll be traveling all over the place.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the goal. And again, I think like that space, like having that happen, I think will generate naturally, some connections between
Right.
people. So
Absolutely. And that's through the ringer, right? That's not necessarily the teams that are flying you out. It's through the ringer that's flying you out.
yeah, that would be through the ringer, and I'm pretty sure they'd make me, figure it out on myself. But we'll see. They've got Spotify money, so
There exactly. Because that's the thing too, right? Being able to travel on the corporate dime, right? I mean,
right.
I did that for a little while, and I had to expense a lot for a while, which
Yeah,
kicked me in the pants, especially early on in my career. But then when they had the corporate card, then you had a little bit more flexibility. You didn't have to always limit yourself as much as you had to. So that's why I was actually that's exciting. Get your travel in early
yeah.
while you're young, and then this way, as you get older, and you're able to go ahead and be like a Doug Haller and just build a family, but still cover the sports that you love.
Right.
So now, what are you? So you're covering NBA right now, right? So we were talking about this. What game are you watching right now?
Oh, so yeah, like the Ringer has like it's very very much the NBA has always been a very NBA centric,
Okay.
space, because Bill Simmons has built his following through
Right.
NBA fans. So we have like a blog, a running blog of like everything that's happening in the bubble. I
Okay.
didn't realize I was scheduled at the same time as this, so again, apologies to the audience, but yeah, I watched the Celtics and Sixers game before. I wrote something
Okay.
real quick on that before I jumped on here, and then I'll write something off the Clippers and Mavericks game when this is over too. And I don't know, like I've covered NBA events before, and like even when I was in New York with Sports Illustrated, like that,
Right.
I think that's where I wrote the most features stuff. Now that I think about it, but
Hmm.
football is still like my number one.
I understand, and I think that's for a lot of us that have built this kind of community, right? Football is where it's at. So, I mean, are there practice? Obviously, they're not necessarily open to the public, but are there practices for football currently, or have they not started yet?
Yeah, so there's training camp right now, and they have media out there. So
Okay,
that's there's different tiers, and I knew that I wasn't going to be shipped out, so forgive me for being on. Like I didn't
fair.
read the email. Like I'm in Pro Football Writers, so they were like, "Oh, if you're in this tier, this tier, this tier, you get access." And I was like, "I'm not going out this year, so
Right,
maybe next year." But yeah,
exactly.
they do have people out there.
That's okay. And so then, what have you been hearing? Like, what's going on out there? Is like, are they? I would imagine they're able to bubble somewhat for these training camps, or what have you been hearing?
So as far as like bubbling is concerned, I mean, I did the Cowboys, as far as I know, like they attempted the best shot at it,
Hmm.
which was everyone getting into a hotel ahead of time,
Okay,
and then taking those 2, 3, 4 days or whatever it was before hitting the training camp field. But I mean, I haven't heard anything. I
okay.
can't even say like I don't have any sources, so this being straight up front, like there, no team sort of been telling me like, hey, like we're going to bubble up players. It's really coming down to players being responsible
Mm,
and as far as I can tell so far, I mean, like all the results the NFL has given suggests that they've been doing a good job to this point.
Okay.
I mean, the season hasn't kicked off yet, and my concern is still like what happens when one player catches it and then
Yeah.
you play a team. I mean, what happens with both teams that played that week if you're turning around and playing a game the next week? I mean, we'll see. But they have rapid testing, so I think
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
time that the NFL has had in between the start of the pandemic and to this point has been really helpful as far as them like developing some type of plan. But there's just too many players for them to bubble. I mean, potentially in the playoffs,
Yeah.
they talked about doing that. I know that they've discussed that, but
That would be because I mean, it's how big's the NFL roster? How many bodies?
you
53?
cut in and out.
How many bodies are
Sorry about
there
that.
on No, it's all right. How many bodies are there in the NFL roster? 53?
Oh yeah, so 53. Yeah,
Yeah.
53 times 32, which I don't know the number off the top of my head, but yeah, that's how many players you have to bubble for a regular season, right? For
Right.
a postseason, that comes down to 14 teams since there's an extra team now. But yeah,
1500?
it's a significantly yeah,
That's a
yeah, it's
small
a
town.
significantly less. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like that is a create like that. That's a lot of people to keep in one space,
And
and I don't know
that's just
financially,
players, right? That's not support staff
right?
equipment, doctors, everything else.
Exactly.
Oh my god. So
Exactly. Financially, this is a lot. It's kind of a shit show because, like, even now, you're asking teams to, I think they're talking about flying two different charters now, as opposed to one, just so there's social distancing. Doesn't account for everybody
wow.
else. Like, there's just so many bodies, and that's the biggest concern for me with the NFL.
I think that's what's going to hamstring football in general, by the way. It's just
Right.
because the sheer number of people, because even if we think about it, right, let's say I think it's 85 scholarships for college ball, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
So even then, and then let's say coaching staff, right? Just the team and coaching staff at the collegiate level is 100 people, and there's 129 schools. So we're looking at bubbling,
Right.
you know, hundreds of thousands of people at any one single time just
Exactly.
to play. So I think it's I don't know. And this is actually an interesting. So this is a good transition. So
Yeah.
everyone is Kaelen Jones, wonderful writer. Met him at ASU. Currently covering NBA out at the Ringer, and going to be doing some additional NFL coverage. But shout out to Justin Prestegard out in Florida. Stay safe. I know you got a couple hurricanes heading your way. Also to Paul Horstein, how are you, my man? Good evening from Long Island. Again, appreciate you both always joining from the East Coast. Um, but back to what I was talking about, right? So thank you again. As always,
Hmm.
post your questions in the chat and we'll feed those to Kaelen as we're moving along. But back to what we were talking about, the COVID-19 and, bubbling football teams and everything else. You have covered Texas football for a year, right? I know you're
Yeah.
not in Austin right now, but obviously, the Big 12 is definitely one of the holdouts, along with ACC and SEC. Given your time at in Texas, and hopefully maybe some of your
Right.
contacts, what are you hearing? You know, given them heading into the fall season, given the situation of COVID-19, have you heard anything? Is there any rumblings? Is there any plans? Anything else along those lines?
I mean, what's all out there is in line with what I've heard too.
Okay.
Like I haven't been in this being me being transparent. I haven't been too in touch with my Texas contacts since I left. Like a
Okay.
few of them, of course, but like I reached out to a parent the other day, and like we were just making sure that that their kid is safe, and
Yeah.
that's the biggest concern. Is that their kid is safe. And
Absolutely.
really the thing is the transparency between Texas football and its parents, like the football team itself, has been very good
Oh,
from what
interesting.
I've heard.
Okay.
But the conference at large, Big 12 at large,
Right.
is kind of where the disconnect has come. And
Mm.
I think that's been, I won't say it's been straight across the board that way, where teams are communicating with both players and parents.
Right.
But I think that this that again comes with each conference, and then really the NCAA at large not having a whatever plan either way. Like for Mark Emmert, whatever a few weeks ago,
Right.
when we were talking about whether or not team or schools were canceling the season or postponing until the spring, for him not to have any say in what happens, for him to just be like, oh, they're autonomous and they do what they want. It's strange because this
Yeah.
is a time where you need one person in leadership
Yep.
and for all the and really for everything to come down to one person say, as opposed to having all these teams, like with the Big Ten, you have Nebraska potentially, or at least reportedly pushing to leave the conference so they can play.
Right.
Like that's what you're risking without someone in leadership taking
Yes.
leadership for what's going on.
100%. And again, that's, I guess, the whole way this thing has been treated. But absolutely, I think that's why everyone was calling for, some sort of lead football commissioner, right? That would be able to make that decision because the NC2A, I don't know. I think that I'm actually kind of hoping we don't see them anymore. They eventually go away because of all this, but it would be good. But
Yeah,
yeah, just having a unified vision would be so much better, right? To be able to,
yeah,
because then you wouldn't have everyone looking. Matt Barry actually said this. He actually tweeted this. He was like, he's torn, right? Because one, Big Ten and the Pac-12 had decided early not to proceed with this, but now
right,
no one's talking about the Pac-12. Does that mean that it was because we were irrelevant to begin with, or it's because they know, okay, Pac-12 made their decision, we don't have to harp on them anymore because
right.
we know everything that they did. And again, back to consistency, but the inconsistencies across conferences, but I just don't know how there's going to be any consistency across all of these.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, facing them is how do you operate under one uniform idea when you are allowed to be autonomous the way that they have.
And
So
they're continuing to push it, so I'm not exactly sure what the best way it's going to be. So, um, Paul was saying, right, it's hard for the college game. A lot of sports can actually be able to do the bubble because they have, or maintain that. But then again, there's contain the teams as well and be able to manage a spread. But I
mhm.
love the chatter, and this is something that he said. Unless they would go to the SEC, meaning Nebraska and everyone else, I would absolutely have loved to have seen some of those teams just fracture off for a season. I think that would have been freaking brilliant. And then all for them to just go ahead and say, "Nah, we're canceling the seasons anyway."
Yeah, that would have been badass, but also, it just comes down to someone saying we're done, and then it's all for nothing.
Now, did you see the Big Ten parent protest this morning?
Yeah, I did see like the parents outside. There were only
Right,
about 30 apparently, but I mean that's the thing. Some parents want their kids, to play, but from what I gathered was that I think a reporter was saying that the parents were there chanting "Let us play," but a parent explained to him that it comes down more again to the transparency of the conference in deciding what it did. Like
right,
there it's not that the parents should have a say. I mean, ultimately your kids are 18 years old, they're allowed to make their own decisions, so
right.
really doesn't matter what happens. Like it's the kids who really need to hear that, but also the parents. They're parents, so
Of
they
course,
should have some type of
they
right.
should be speaking up as they should, and I agree completely. I just wasn't the way the letters and the tweet and just the perception was that there was going to be hundreds of people there, and
Right,
and it
right.
was just they from what I think what you said, right, there were more reporters. I think the reporters were actually expecting that a little bit more, and it was just a tiny handful of parents, so I wasn't exact. It didn't help the cause, is I
No.
think no, and I think that's the most difficult thing with that. So, but what is your general impression with the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 holding out, right? What are your thoughts? Are they going to
Right.
play, or are they going to have to pull the trigger and say, no, we have to shut it down?
I think, well, I've been saying 100% that college football was going to attempt to play. So I'm like, what, 60% now because, you have the two of the Power Five conference have already said they're
Right.
not going to play. But I don't see how they don't. I think that the fact that the players have, said that they want to find a safe way to play, the fact that you have so much money, invested into the start of everything.
Right.
Um, I think that they're gonna find a way to start. My thing has always been what happens when college kids act like college kids, and somebody, one, two players catches it,
And
and
we're
it
seeing that
transmits.
right now.
And that's the thing. Like on college campuses, you already have schools like I believe it's Notre Dame and Michigan State or North Carolina, I believe. Forgive me.
Right.
But like you already have schools who are saying, hey, we need the students to go back or like
Yeah.
quarantine or stay off campus because of outbreaks, which duh, you knew they were gonna get fucking outbreaks when you have thousands of people on your campus.
Well, Paul had
It's
mentioned,
crazy.
Hornstein just mentioned that as well. Alabama just had their outbreak. They had one. It went from it was
Ridiculous.
1%, and now it's up to 29%. So he's like, yeah, we only have a few weeks left before we're at capacity. I'm like, yeah, that's gonna be it. But again, that's the whole thing. Is like even yeah, and then it's like, what do you know what bid day is? Because I have no idea what that is. Because I mean, I remember seeing pictures about this big crowd in Tuscaloosa celebrating bid day, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if you know.
Say that part one more time. I'm sorry, I lost you.
No, it's okay.
My
It's
Wi-Fi's.
all good. It's called bid day. I don't know if
Hmm.
you know, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's what that event
No.
was in Alabama. So I'm just trying to figure out
Okay.
what that was, why everyone was unmasked. And the other thing too is that if everyone just had a mask on, I think it would have been okay. But how you gonna
Right.
how you gonna drink with a mask on, which is against
That's the
clearly
thing.
the case. And that was another thing. I don't know if you saw that tweet, but it was the governor of Mississippi was throwing shade at the Pac-12. Did you see that?
Hmm. No, I didn't. I didn't see it.
He was bad mouthing it, saying, it's like you guys kind of pulled the trigger a little too early, and you were still we're. It was right after he announced that there was going to be no tailgating, but he also reduced the
Mm,
capacity to about 25%. But then someone kind of clapped back and said, "It's like, well, your Mississippi is having an increase in cases more than California, which is a ratio of
right.
10 to 1 or whatever it is from population relative
Right.
to Mississippi to California." So anyway, but how is your family? Obviously, you're from the LA area, right?
Right. Hmm.
How is your family dealing with, you know, the Rona in SoCal? I'm in NorCal, but how are they doing it in SoCal?
Yeah. So it's been pretty bad, like in LA County. I
Hmm.
mean, like they definitely had like an outbreak. Goes without saying. Like at one point, so this is my family situation back home. My mom, and my younger brother and younger sister,
Right.
they both live with my mom, and they all three of them they live in my grandparents' house. So
Oh,
my grandfather, he's been retired. Like he's he was in a nursing home because something I can't forgive me. I can't even remember.
all
He's
good.
sick all the time, but he beats everything. So we kind I
Yeah.
joke about how he's gonna live forever because he gets sick and always gets better. But he was in a nursing home and actually caught COVID while he was there, but he
No
was
way.
asymptomatic. Like I think he had like a fever, I think, or a runny nose, or something, but he no symptoms for him. So he had to
Wow.
stay there and he quarantined and did the whole 14 days or whatever, and they released him and said that he was fine. But I mean, luckily, that's been the only scare so far
Right, of
for me.
course.
Like my brother, my younger brother, he's 20, just turned 20. He's in college, and he hasn't been on campus or anything. So he's been doing online learning. My
Right.
sister, she's 16. She's doing online learning at her high school. So
Yep.
it's been an adjustment, but everyone's doing well. So I'm just grateful that no one's sick or anything.
That's the scary thing too, right? Because you're going out, and if they have to go out or you have to go someplace, right? It's like, okay, who else isn't taking
Yep,
care of everyone else, right? Because
exactly.
Mrs. Jedi, as you just had surgery 8 weeks ago,
Hmm.
and so she had the thing. She had the surgery, came
Oh,
home, was doing fine, but then 2 days
right.
later developed a fever,
Oh
and she
wow.
had this fever and everything else, and so it wasn't going away, and she had some pain, but she we went to the ER, and we were there waiting
Right.
outside for all but 2.5 hours because they thought she had it. They thought she had
Wow.
COVID-19. They let her in, and then it was about 2 hours later. Said, "Okay, they finally gave me a
Mm,
test, and we're just freaking out the entire time." And in about 45 minutes, her phone buzzed, and on the phone, it came up with the results. So she knew
right.
via her device that she was negative before the
Uh-huh.
doctor came in. But it was just like you said. I mean, it's nerve wracking to be able to go through that. And
Yeah.
it's just. I don't know. How old's your mom?
She's 57.
Okay, so I'm in that range as well, right? I'm in my late 40s, right? So we're in that range. My parents are in that range.
Mhm.
Your grandparents are in that range, right? So we're all those particular
Right.
target ranges. So it's always kind of crazy. That's why I'm just trying to exercise as much as I can. So then this way, if I have
Right.
to fight something
Yep.
off, that'll be it. But
Yep.
I'm glad they're okay, and that's always it. Because I've talked with a few people that actually have had it, right? And they've recovered. They weren't even, but it was just like one guy joined the Sun Devil Summit, and
Right.
he lost the sense of smell, sense of taste. He got all. I'm like, wow. I mean, I can't even
Yep.
imagine going through that. And I'm worried about with flu season, right? It's like, okay, if you catch it,
Right.
but if it's, let's say it's a regular cold or a flu and it's not COVID-19, then how do you like keep your peace of mind, right? Because you're freaking out.
Exactly. Yep.
That's the,
Yeah,
of
I've had friends from ASU freak out, like people my
course.
age. Like it's crazy. And that's the thing. For me, I definitely have been like nervous about it because before, but I have asthma, so I am higher risk for the severe
Yes.
symptoms. So and it's crazy because like I've heard, within my own friend group, from ASU, some of the dudes that like they get sick and then they'll freak out and we'll try not to freak out. We'll be all
Of
uplifting
course.
and say you're all right. But you just never know right now because it's such a weird disease. It's an anomaly.
It's an absolute, I guess, because I always never knew why everyone kept calling it novel, and it's like, oh, because it is brand new, and
Yeah.
every single thing you learn is brand new, and that's why it's always kind of nerve wracking with that. But I've had my neighbor, his parents flew in from
Mhm.
Kentucky. They did a whole flight. They flew in from Kentucky, came back, and they were fine here and on the way back. I mean, they were masked
Mhm.
up and they took care of themselves. But it's
Right.
just I wouldn't get on a plane. I mean, so you're in Washington right now, so
Yeah,
you
I'm in
could
Pullman.
so you could probably drive to LA if you needed to, but it you could
Right.
still
If I
see them.
absolutely needed to.
And yeah, and I mean you guys are definitely, quarantining and sheltering in place and everything else. But in Pullman, what's it like? Is I mean, I'd only imagine that there's no traffic, but I mean, what's it like when you have to leave the house?
Oh man, so like we go pick up groceries every now and then. So it's like it's like any other city. Everything is so small. Let me say it's not like every other city. Everything is so small out here that when it's rush hour, like when everyone's getting off work, there's still people on the roads. Like there will be some traffic, but it's because the roads are like 2 lanes and
Right,
that's it. But there's not a lot of people and it's really spread out. And the neighboring city in Idaho, because Pullman is like right on the border,
right.
we drive 15 minutes over to Idaho, like in a city called Moscow,
Yes, right.
and
It is
pick
that
up all
close,
groceries and everything else. That's the only time like we'll see traffic
right?
like that.
Why do you go to Moscow? Right, because is it because it's just closer? Is
Groceries.
that where all the groceries and everything else
Yeah, all
is
the
there?
grocery stores.
Oh,
Yep.
got it. Okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if it was like a taxes thing or something, or if it was cheaper. It's like, no,
It
everything's over
I
there.
don't know. I should ask. I've never really asked why. It's just kind of, oh, cool, we're going to Idaho because you see the University of Idaho, which is right across the street from everything. So
They're that close
pretty
then.
campus. Yeah, they are that close. Yeah,
Wow.
it's like 10 minutes away.
Interesting. Are you ready for that cold though?
No, that's the thing. Like I'm trying to figure out what do I do because like I want to fly back to get all my stuff and be in my own space again, but also it's like I don't want to risk catching the virus just because of
Yeah.
a flight. It's
That
it's
would
it's
be
weird. It's weird.
you haven't heard a lot. I mean, it's just one thing that the airlines have going for them is that you're not hearing a lot of spread from flights, which
Right.
is kind of a solace if you absolutely must travel and you have to get on a plane. At least there's some comfort with that. But I agree with you. Why risk it, right? And
Exactly.
you don't have a car there, right? Is all your stuff is
No,
still
I
in
don't.
all your
Yep. All
stuff
my
is
stuff is
still in.
still in Austin. Yep.
Do you have a place down there, or is it just all your stuff in storage?
No, I still have my place out there. So I got screwed. I can tell you this story.
Yeah, please.
So when I got laid off by the Athletic, like 2 months before in February, right before the pandemic hit,
Okay.
like I renewed my lease.
Okay.
So it runs through 2021. And
You
then
were
the
there for a
pandemic hit.
year. You were there for a year.
Exactly, and I was thinking, so all everything I just gotten back from our college football summit over in Indianapolis at the combine, and I talked, leadership, and I was like, okay, cool. I know I didn't do the best job I could have done, but they were like, oh, cool, we'll give you another year. I was like, cool, I get
Thank
another
you.
year, I'll kill it. And then I got laid off like 3 or 4 months later,
Yeah.
and I went to my leasing office. They're like, oh no, you already signed, so you are locked in there. And there's instead of subleasing, you have to relet, which means you pay 2 months worth of rent,
Hmm.
and including another fee for them to go find other people to fill the space.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm not going to do that because I might as well. No one is looking for an apartment. I was trying not to be a dick on the phone because I'm not trying to be an asshole, but also I'm like, hey, like, are you guys even selling like apartments
Yeah.
right now? And she got really quiet. On my landlord got really quiet, and I was just like, cool, like I'm getting screwed here. But
Yeah.
I've kept my lease, and it's kind of been a blessing in disguise because you know
Everything's there.
Spotify is asking for our employee, like at the Ringer, we're not expected to be back in office until June 2021. That could change. They're saying, hey, we want you,
Got it.
like, it's fluid, but right now the order is everyone's working from home until June 2021.
Wow.
So my
And
lease will be.
that's the other thing too, is like that's the remote work
Yep.
rule, right? But they're still keeping you okay, you're still working, it's just you're fully remote. And right. And is the headquarters there, or they just have an office there?
So the Ringers headquarters are in Los Angeles, and then they have another office in New York.
Okay.
But Spotify, I mean, they're all over the place. They're based in Sweden, which it was cool finding all this